Multiculturalism is now seeing its day come to an end, but anyway, I don't think these gentlemen necessarily were Marxists, but they were so infused with Marxism they couldn't get out of bed without a good dose of it. We're done now with Bodsford and Robinson. A few useful additions, I thought, there. Now we go back to Starr, and we shall recontinue where we had been. We said before, the older units, the phratries and the like, continue to exist but operated as social and religious entities. The dynamo of the whole government was now definitely the assembly. Cleisthenes established in place of Solon's council a new council of 500, consisting of 50 men from each tribe, chosen by lot from candidates elected by the demes, to prepare business for the assembly and supervise from day to day the execution of public business by the officials. Archons continued to be elected and to pass, after their year of office, into the council of the Areopagus, which still had considerable ancestral power. At the time of the reforms, Cleisthenes and his adherents spoke of isonomia, equality of rights, and his reforms had the great virtue of uniting all elements of the state in a solid political system. The term demokratia, rule of the people, was soon to become popular, and further democratic steps were taken in the next 50 years. The new system proved its popular support and its effectiveness within 2 years, when the Boeotians and Chalcis tried to attack Athens in 506. Both were defeated, and the Athenians took a part of the territory of Chalcis. Here they settled 4,000 colonists, called Claruches, who continued to be Athenian citizens, though living abroad. By 500, Athens had achieved a satisfactory internal political system. Abroad, its influence was expanding commercially and politically, but it was still a minor state in comparison to Sparta. So let's look at Sparta in depth just a bit here. Spartan history through the 7th century, the 600s. The evolution of Sparta had followed a different course, which on the whole had been less troubled than was that of Athens. In folk memory, the Dorians were said to have come down rather late into Laconia, the rich valley of the Eurotos River, with its surrounding hills tucked off in the South Peloponnesus. Contrary to the usual pattern, the invaders amalgamated on even terms with the earlier population, centered at Amyclea. To this union perhaps may be attributed the strange fact that Sparta had 2 kings. The kings, and we've seen that before, the kings and nobles of Sparta enjoyed the developing luxury of the Age of Revolution, much as did similar classes elsewhere. Some of the earliest ivories in Greece have been found in Sparta, the shrine of Artemis Orthia. Music and choral poetry were so esteemed that such experts in the field as Terpander of Lesbos and Alcman of Sardis were drawn to Sparta in the 7th century. Along with other poets from all over Greece, they competed at the great Spartan festival of Carneia in honor of Apollo, held in early fall. To the west, the Spartans had greater scope and at an uncertain date in the 8th century conquered the most fertile part of Messenia, which lay beyond the great bulk of Mount Taygetus. The crucial step in Spartan development came when the Messenians revolted about 640 and held out bitterly over perhaps 2 decades. In the reconquest, the Spartan armies were encouraged by the martial poetry of Tritadius, but more than poetry was needed. Immediately, the political system of Sparta seems to have been drastically reorganized, and over the long run, the social and economic structure of the state was reordered. The guiding principle of Spartan thought over the next 2 centuries was to remain militarily strong so as to keep the unwilling subjects under control. At the time of the Second Messenian War, Sparta took some of the earliest steps towards democracy which had occurred anywhere in Greece. Distinctions of class among the full Spartan citizens were outwardly erased so as to gain their loyalty to the state. Thenceforth, this group was called the equals. I pause there and say, did Athens have the better system, or did Sparta, of erasing inequality? In Athens, the erasure of inequality was to treat every man on equal grounds. If you're productive, then we give you more, or you are more. If you're not as productive, you are less. So it was based on every man's equality of opportunity, but in Sparta it was egalitarian equality. By a famous decree, the Great Rhetra, R-H-E-T-R-A, the assembly of men over 30 was formally acknowledged as the ultimate authority, though a later amendment permitted the kings and elders to dismiss it if it decided improperly. Reorganization of military and voting districts also took place so as to reduce the power of the old social groupings. The generals and religious heads of the state continued to be the two kings, but detailed direction of public activities was largely in other hands. A council of elders, the Gerousia, consisted of the two kings and 28 men of 60 years of age or more. This is in a time when life expectancy is not that high. Elected for life by acclamation in the assembly. Each year, 5 ephors, E-P-H-O-R-S, were elected to supervise the social system of Sparta. By the 5th century, the ephors also checked the kings. Once established, the structure of arrested democracy endured without serious changes until the 4th century BC. Now a little bit about Spartan life. The Spartan social system was a famous model in antiquity because of its emphasis upon state service, physical training, and stability. In tradition, it was established by a legendary figure, Lycurgus, but in actuality, it seems to have evolved out of the communal life of the early warrior brotherhoods. Very similar patterns developed in several Cretan districts, but there they were less harnessed to the conscious needs of the state. Okay, we continue now in Star. Upon birth, Spartan children were inspected by state officials to determine whether they were physically fit to be raised. At the age of 7, boys left home and were trained in groups under teenage leaders. At the age of 20, they passed into the brotherhoods or squads of 15 each, where they ate common meals once a day and perfected military skills. Until they were 30, men could not dwell permanently with their wives, who lived both as girls and as women, a far freer existence than was common elsewhere in Greek society. He says no more about that, but that would be interesting to know a few more details. To support the equals, who numbered up to 9,000, the land was divided into plots cultivated by helots, so that the citizens would be free for military training and warfare. So in Sparta, they had a slave population to get their food from, and then they maintained a military machine, supposedly to defend themselves in a vicious world, right? Athens arguably defended itself just as well, almost as well, by leaving the military defense up to the people spontaneously, almost. Not completely spontaneously, but almost spontaneous. Very different approaches to having some method of being safe in a world where if you don't have city walls, someone will come and take everything you own. So they had the helots, so the citizens would be free for military training and warfare. Every year, in a ritualistic holiday, they declared war on the helots, just to renew the fight. Trade and industry were largely conducted by the perioikoi, P-E-R-I-O-I, K-O-I. In many ways, the Spartan structure was thus one where the citizen body as a whole formed an aristocracy, but in which the old family groups had been broken down for the benefit of the state. The virtues of this system appealed greatly to many conservative thinkers in later ages, for rather than pursuing wealth and learning, the Spartans devoted themselves to their country and thus made the attainment of a high standard of noble living a public duty. That is from Xenophon, Constitution of the Spartans. It was not difficult for philosophers such as Plato to idealize Spartan education and society into a system which no earthly men could ever have upheld. In particular, many of the famous stories about the rigors of Spartan life are either legend or reflect much later conditions. Other observers, ancient and modern, have scornfully compared Sparta to the democratic national ideal of Athens, and have noted that after the mid-6th century, Sparta played a very minor role in the development of Greek art and literature. Here, too, thinking is often fuzzy. Now, he's making a case for Sparta. He's making a case here that Athens isn't so great compared to Sparta, and Sparta wasn't so lowly culturally as everyone